Welcome to Camp, the Coaching and Mentoring Playbook. I'm your host, Shepard Vargo. We just wrapped up 5 weeks of our sports leadership workshop at Emerson College, where Beat the Streets New England brought some of its Boston wrestlers onto campus to train, lift, create, and explore what sports can offer beyond competition. So for this conversation, I sat down with my mentor and longtime friend of over 10 years, Dr. Gregory Payne, Chair of Communication Studies at Emerson College. Now, Greg has had a very extensive career doing projects all over the world and is very knowledgeable on the subject. And none of this would have been able to happen at Emerson if it wasn't for him being such an advocate for civic engagement projects. Coming out of those 5 weeks, I've been doing my due diligence. I've been thinking a lot about what we are actually doing there and what happens when sports becomes a vehicle for civic engagement, when we use it to teach young people how to communicate, understand rhetoric, tell their own stories, and ultimately see themselves as people capable of influencing the world around them. And that was one thing that I was really excited about. Was I wanted our young wrestlers to become the spokesperson in the city of Boston to grow wrestling and for people to understand how much this sport has impacted them. So throughout the conversation, we talked about his career and his experience in this realm. And we talked about civic engagement projects he's been involved with, sports as soft power. And we talked about how all of this overlapped into what we were trying to do with the summer workshop at Emerson College. And more than anything, this conversation, I think, gets at a question that I keep coming back to, and especially when I think about my own experience in the sport of wrestling growing up in the 90s, and then what I'm seeing in the city now, the city of Boston, as well as just youth sports around the whole country, is if youth sports are already functioning as a civic institution, which I think they do, then how come we don't treat them that way? So I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Thank you for tuning in, and let's give welcome to Dr. Gregory Payne.
Welcome. Thank you for joining. And today I have the honor of having on a longtime friend and mentor and someone I've had the chance to work on numerous fun and engaging projects with, Chair of Communication Studies at Emerson College, Dr. Gregory Payne.
It's a pleasure to be here, Shepard.
Yeah, and as part of your introduction, as I told you before, I want to let the world know, because Greg has a very extensive history on some really cool projects that we'll hear about today, and some of the things that I've gotten to learn about and collaborate with. But one that goes by that he doesn't mention much is he won the Wheel of Fortune a long time ago, and we're still looking for that footage.
Well, I would say continue to look. I didn't win much. I won a Naugahyde Stratolounger and lots of rice and roni. And Shepard would probably say, "Are you still eating it?" No, it's gone. But if it was still around, I'd probably just rub out the expiration date.
Well, thank you for joining. We just finished a very engaging summer program at Emerson College where we had Beat the Streets youth on campus 4 days a week, and they were training, but they were also working with faculty and alumni and other guest speakers who come in. And we'll talk a little bit about that today. But part of that became a thing was because you are very passionate about civic engagement, and that's where we've been able to collaborate a lot. And you are pushing Emerson to do more in this arena, as you have done in the past. Can you talk to us about civic engagement, and what does that actually mean to you?
I think the importance of civic engagement became very important to me when I was a student at the University of Illinois in Urbana-Champaign. And part of what there was a project that was called the PAL program, and we were matched with people from some challenging areas in the Champaign-Urbana community. And I got to know a young man, African-American kid who was about 8 years old, named Ricky. And it was very interesting for me to visit his house and get to know the culture, because I came from Southern Illinois where there were not many people of color. And then I remember once asking his mother, I'd love for him to come down and be a part of, living on a farm, et cetera. So he came down, and it was a very, very rewarding experience. We've continued to stay in contact. But I began to appreciate the importance of civic engagement, realizing that you're a part of a community. So I've continued that at Emerson. When I was working for Mayor Bradley in Los Angeles, I was a part of the PAL program there. And then here at Emerson, we've had various responses after the Newtown shooting. Neil Harris, who's a part of the Newton schools, I think. But at that time, we wanted to engage, and so we've worked with the programs here, especially Bird Street. We have the Emerson Bird Street program. And I just think that being a part of the civic community, you're giving back and you're enriching people, providing pathways that you never know where they're going to go.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you mentioned, and I've heard your stories about Ricky in the past, um, and you mentioned the University of Illinois, and I know one of the reasons why you decided to go there was actually because of their basketball team, and you were a basketball player when you were a kid, and you today, even to this point, we won't talk about Coach Gardner right now, but
He's indelibly imprinted in my brain.
but even today, I know you're such a huge fan of their basketball team, and
Yes.
mainly because that's better than their football team, I think.
Well, the football team did very well. We won our bowl game, and I think we're on the right trajectory.
Yeah, yeah. So like sports are a big part of, you, and maybe some people don't realize that because you have so much experience in the realm of political communication.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously Emerson has a sports communication program. How does youth sports and sports in general fit into civic engagement?
Well, I think one thing I would like to do, even though Coach Garner is no longer with us, what Shepard was referring to when I was a kid is I was not really putting my wherewithal in terms of a practice because I was involved in a little entrepreneurial store at the recess, and he said to me, "Hey, Payne, you big girl, you've got to take some laps," and so I did that, and I got very upset with him. But he triggered something, and as I think I've told you, the next game I scored 8 points, which probably was my career high. But I think I remember the importance of mentorship and coaching. And I think what we've seen at Emerson, when we first started talking about the sports comm program, Emerson's known for communication and arts. We're downtown, we have a lot of theaters. And many of the academic leadership said to me, I don't think that really fits. But when I looked at people that had graduated from Emerson, it could be Lee Stacy, who was involved with public relations, public affairs for the Wizards. You had Al Jaffe, who was vice president for ESPN. Wayne Larrabee was the voice of the Packers. Tim Neverett, of course, now is also a play call. We have an entire network of people, including, of course, the head of the Oklahoma Thunder, who's now Sam Presti, who is now a board of trustee member. So I think you could see that Emerson had more or less an imprint. And what I wanted to do is how could we more or less put together to train not just people in sports comm, but leaders in sports comm. So we've launched that program. We've attracted a whole new demographic to Emerson. We've got a very, very strong women's program as well as men's. And what we've attempted to do is to bring people in who are strong athletes, sound body, sound mind, the Greek ideal, but to teach them the importance of communication skills. Because at the end of the day, in the communities that we live in, many people have lost touch with kind of government. And I think all of us have to begin the change within each of us. And that's why I'm very excited with the programs that we've had at Emerson that are civically engagement programs oriented, because people realize if you have strong communication skills, you can reach out and find something that unites us rather than accentuate and be a victim of what divides us.
Yeah, yeah, and I agree. And obviously, that plays a big role in, me trying to train the next generation of wrestling coaches here in the city of Boston. And something I'm super passionate about, and why we have our producer on the show is college wrestler, but also coaches a lot of our youth, is he's becoming exactly that type of leader who's able to communicate effectively and bring people together. And kind of just by design, right, is he's getting the experimental practice of being a communicator within new media. And I think Emerson has always been a place where kids get their hands dirty. They're right there in the projects. They're being engaged. And when I first met you, it was out in California, and then quickly to the project in Rosarito. And it was one of the most extraordinary things I ever participated in as a college student. And I remember just, especially at that time, just how hands-on everything was for me and how brand new that type of experience for me within the academic setting was. How important is that experimental hands-on learning for young people in developing their leadership skills?
Well, I think it's essential, especially when we're looking at the value of college. I think we have to prepare everybody that comes through our doors for the marketplace, and that is giving them skills where they're going to understand, of course, public speaking, giving speeches, being an advocate, using the power of speech, but also being familiar with the various apps, whether you're on Facebook, whether you're on TikTok, whatever the messaging is going to be different than if I'm talking to you in a conversation. Marshall McLuhan said when I was a student many years ago that the medium is the message or the medium is the massage. And I think the effective communicator And to me, the effective person in life is going to be a communicator that is able to persuade people, influence people, and be able to be a role model for those people. But more importantly, is going to be a good listener. And to me, one of the skills that we lack today, and it's something that I see within you and the people that you coach and mentor, which is all a part of teaching, is empathy and being able to understand and be in the shoes of the people that you're talking to.
So you would say like media literacy is like important for people to be involved civically today and participate civically, and being able to have the skills to use rhetoric and persuasive abilities to get them to be effective. What is that like as someone who has taught speech and who has written speech? And, some of those challenges, 'cause I hear from so many people today how young people just aren't leaning into that side of the communication anymore. What is that like past and present when you taught speech in the past for a very long time, and then this present group of young people who are often very much attached to their phone and their devices?
Well, I think one thing that when I think of Emerson, and one reason I like Emerson, is it's been committed to one thing. It's been committed to storytelling since 1880. So we're attempting to tell stories. We're attempting to more or less use the spoken words, use kinesics, use proxemics, and to be involved in what I call AA, which is not, it's not Alcoholics Anonymous, but audience analysis. And to always say, who am I speaking to? And to try to figure out exactly what is going right and what is going wrong, and how can we make things better. Not only me as a leader trying to tell you what to do, but engaging you to become an adaptive leader and moving others to also take that step. The one thing I would say is public speaking is as old as civilization. Of course, we have different parts, but in the Western part, we are always indebted to Aristotle, who in the Rhetoric 2,000 years ago plus said that rhetoric or effective communication was discovering all the available means of persuasion. So initially it was the spoken word. We then have gone through, and of course everyone said it was going to be forever changed with the Gutenberg galaxy, the printing press. And we've constantly adapted to the radio. We've constantly adapted to the internet. And now, of course, we have this new app and we have AI. And that's why a theme that I like to stress is from Aristotle to AI. And I think a good communicator, a good mentor, a good coach has to understand the audience, but also has to understand what is the best tool for me to reach. If you're reaching my age group, probably Facebook, maybe Twitter. But if you're reaching the group, of course, our champion who's a part of this process, I'll probably want to go to TikTok. I'll want to go to some other type of social app. So always trying to figure out how can I best reach that person so I can have an effective communication model.
Yeah, and this summer we had our kids have the opportunity to learn how to podcast as well. And I thought that was very good because I feel like, as they age a little bit, they'll kind of grow into that audience because much of that audience is like mid-20s up to 30s and 40s. And they had a great time doing that, as well as working on creating content on other platforms and understanding the technical side as well as the storytelling side, which was really awesome for them. I want to switch gears just a little bit. All of this overlaps into your core beliefs in communication and bringing people together and bridge building. I took a group of kids to compete at Beat the Streets Nationals in Cleveland this summer, and most of them have, from the Boston side of that, have spent a lot of time around me as well as having met you. And we took a trip to the Guardian Stadium where they had different sports, people from different areas in the sports industry come and speak to them. And one was a PR person for, I want to say it was the Cavaliers. And one of my athletes asked a question about soft power. Mm-hmm. And I don't think this person had mentioned she went to Syracuse. So no shade on Syracuse because I know they're a great communication school. But it seemed like she didn't really know the term soft power, maybe because she hasn't had exposure to public diplomacy in that realm. Could you explain the concept of soft power to someone who maybe has no understanding of that and how that overlaps in some of the work you do?
Yes, I think one thing after graduating from the University of Illinois, I was out at Occidental and I worked for Tom Bradley in his political campaign. And when he lost, and I only mention this because if you're listening and you have an objective and sometimes it doesn't work out, I think what you always realize is that it's almost like the Odyssey, the road to Ithaca. There is a reason why it didn't work out. And I came to Boston, I went to Harvard, And during that time, I became very familiar with Professor Nye's concept of soft power. And soft power is different from hard power. Hard power, of course, if I force you, if I threaten you, oftentimes I think in war, blockades, embargoes, those are ways I'm trying to threaten you in order to induce an action. With soft power, which of course, as a rhetorician, as somebody who believes in the power of communication, soft power is what we would call influence. And it can be influenced through you as a persona. Aristotle called that ethos. You can have a charismatic quality. It can also be through various brands. Take for instance, FIFA was a good example because what we saw was the power of sports. Boston, I have never seen Boston the way it was. I mean, we always are going to have fond memories of the Scots. And what you saw was finally people, even Boston, which can be a bit grumpy, came together, and it was because of sports bringing us together with a common theme. We did care about religion. We didn't really care about politics. We didn't really care about anything other than this one period where we shared common rules and we were rooting for our favorite teams. And the beauty of what I saw you do this summer with wrestling is you brought people together, and it was a very, very kind of Greek example of strong body, strong mind. They did their wrestling, but they also had mentorship. They also had coaching. We had individuals, my colleague from Jordan, come and talk about the power of that. Emerson has a very strong tradition in terms of the Olympics, another good example of global soft power with Coach Peckham, and of course his wrestling tradition throughout Boston and throughout the country. And I think what you saw was students came together because of wrestling, but then they stayed. They learned the power of podcasting. They learned the power of conflict resolution. How do you present something? How do you refute an argument you don't believe? But more importantly, the respect of diverse points of view. So soft power, I think, to me, is the hidden tool, and especially with governments failing all around the world, including here. If you don't like government, if you don't like electoral politics, the next great movement to unite people begins with each and every one of us.
I love that. And you mentioned Dan Russell, who is running Wrestling for Peace in Jordan, outstanding wrestler back in the 90s and has been involved with USA Wrestling all over the world. And, I've always advocated for stuff like this from the wrestling perspective because, at Emerson and some of the circles that we've got to be around that you've introduced me to, maybe they don't know too much about the sport of wrestling and they don't realize that, it's Russia, Iran, China, Japan, like some of these countries where, wrestling is very, very popular there. And that bridge that the U.S. wrestlers could build, those communities, is really, really powerful. And Dan got to speak with our kids about that, and they absolutely loved hearing it. I love the work he's doing. He was talking about Azerbaijan and these kind of connections that he's able to make and growing the sport of wrestling. And, he's just a very good representative of, the sports as soft power in that sense. Can you tell us a little bit about your trips to the Olympics that you've taken students on, maybe how that started and, some of the values that have kind of flourished because of that, as well as, we had Melissa Galati, who was part of that first trip, and she mentioned the experiential learning, how they got busy on their project while they were over there, and you pushed them out there and said, get after it.
Yes. Well, I think a couple of things. My first participation with the Olympics was, as I said, I wrote speeches for Mayor Bradley when he ran for governor. And after he lost in '82 in the closest California election in California history, he really doubled down and he worked with Peter Ruberoth because LA is going to be hosting in 28 the third Olympics, and it will be at the Coliseum as well as other venues. But part of what Mayor Bradley wanted to do was to establish Los Angeles as a place where you could leave politics behind and we come together and we really enjoy the games. And what was intriguing at the time is in 1980, America did not go to the Moscow Olympics because President Carter did not like the fact that Russia had invaded Afghanistan. So again, politics was interfering with this wonderful global event, and Russia said they weren't coming to, the Soviet Union was not coming to Los Angeles. But Mayor Bradley said, let's use sports again as a way, again, of breaking down the walls, because in the past, Taiwan had come, but what was referred to then as communist China had not come. They had been continued to sort of be by themselves. And I think it was a great peak, a great opening for China, of course, which is a major superpower now. But we invited China to come, and I know when they did, they were a bit resistant, and of course they have not been coming to any of those events. Richard Nixon had used ping pong diplomacy against soft power to open up the doors to China, which I think was a very positive thing for President Nixon. What we were instructed to do is let's make sure we give them a very positive welcome. So when they came into the Coliseum, I think they were nervous to come to the U.S. because, this was communist China and they had not had that much experience. Everybody in the Coliseum got up and gave them a standing ovation. And we have seen the remarkable progress and embracement of soft power of China today with one of the most successful Olympics, and that would be in Beijing, which I think showed how well they could do it. What I was a believer after that was I said, I can't wait to take a group of people to the Olympics. And then when I was at Emerson, I talked to Javier Curtix, who said you should come to the Spanish Olympics. And I immediately thought, because I had studied in Madrid when I was at Illinois, Madrid. And he goes, no, Barcelona. I'd never been to Barcelona, but we took a group of students, including Melissa. And when we took them, we basically said you need to find a project. It could be city branding. It could be something where you're looking at how this is going to change Barcelona forever, which it has. It's no longer a stepsister. It's one of the top cities in the world to visit. And so we threw them in, and my whole view with regard to education is I don't usually tiptoe into the water. I like to take you in the middle of the ocean, as you know, in Rosarito, and say, okay, let's see how you do it. They're always with with a life raft or whatever, if you need problems. But I think what we saw in Barcelona was an appreciation not only of the Catalan culture, not only of the Catalan cuisine, that appreciation that they have potentially the oldest parliament in the entire world, but also the beauty that you could see what the Olympics did, and that is we had Montserrat Caballé, who was an award-winning, very traditional opera sopranoist who was from Barcelona, and we had Freddie Mercury, who at the time had just been diagnosed with AIDS, and AIDS was becoming an epidemic. And Barcelona, which epitomizes the creativity of the city, said, let's have the two of them get together. And both groups of, Mercury and Montserrat said, this is toxic. Cannot do this. They came together, and I would just ask people listening, go to YouTube and watch Montserrat Caballé, traditional, and Freddie Mercury, who was, of course, dying of AIDS, and did die before the Olympics, put together and give this incredible song, Barcelona. Now, I'm going to go quickly because you know me and I could go on forever. Barcelona is the most creative city in the world, in my opinion. And people always ask me, because I'm a big fan of Boston, which I think is the sports capital. Sports is very, very important here. But when you think of where I would, if you said to me, you can only be in a city for the rest of your life, it starts with a B, but does not rhyme with Austin. It's Barcelona. Part of it is a city by the Mediterranean. And you know about it. You've got your masters there. It's magical. And I think what sports and that Olympics did was ignite people. Melissa's worked with the Olympics, everyone in that group. And since that time, I've taken people to 5 different Olympics. In Athens, getting ready to go again to Los Angeles, which will be the 3rd time. And again, I'm a huge fan of the Olympics, as you can tell.
And you went to the Atlanta Olympics?
I went to the Atlanta Olympics. Very, very different from the from Barcelona. And, the Atlanta Olympics were commercial in many ways, but I think they also did epitomize, I got an understanding of the South. And, of course, we had a group of students who went down. Luckily, we were away from the Olympic Park where the explosion occurred. But it was great then to go back into Athens, which was 4 years off because the IOC picked Atlanta, and to see where it all began with Matthew Matsaganis, who was one of the students who went on that first trip.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm excited for the upcoming Olympics, and I'm sure you're going to be there because LA is like a second home for you. And, obviously, for those listening, they can probably already hear how involved you've been in LA throughout your life and career. So that Olympics is going to be incredible. I think it's an honor that we're going to be able to host it, and maybe we'll get you at a wrestling event this year since you probably haven't visited any of the wrestling matches at previous Olympics.
Yes. Well, the one thing I would say about LA, and one reason why I think the 84 games was very, very important was before 84, everything was publicly funded. So it was all on the taxpayers. And that's why Montreal, I think, is still paying. But Mayor Bradley and Peter Rubroth said, let's try something. Let's try commodification where you had private sponsorship. And I'm sure many listeners are going to go, I don't like the idea that you've got McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Those brands are associated with one of the most prized brands in the entire world, with the Olympics. And because of that, you've been able to see Olympics make money. The beauty that I like about LA is there aren't going to be new venues that are going to be needed. They're going to be using existing venues. And I would say for all the people in Boston, just to pause here, I've been on 2 committees attempting to get the Olympics to come to Boston. If you want to be happy like you were for the entire FIFA exhibit, bring the Olympics to Boston.
That would be awesome.
Yes.
That'd be really cool. I think Boston is a deserving place. It's a staple here for American history. As you say, it's the front porch. The Boston
America,
Common
yes.
is the front porch of America. I would be really excited. Plus, there's venues for it. There's great venues here for it. So speaking of like these international trips, we mentioned briefly Rosarito. One thing that I've always loved when we've gone on those trips, because I've gone multiple times now and been part of your project there, is when we go and visit the Boys and Girls Club. So could you give a brief explanation of why you started the Rosarito project, but also kind of lean into some of these projects we've done with the Boys and Girls Club that, to me, really end up being a big portion of the trip, which you're able to connect with Rosie out there. And it's not the main of it's part of what you're trying to teach the people in the class.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the main project that they're running, but that's always stood out to me as one of the most important things we've done on the trip.
I think one probably a little bit of a background. I got very involved in public diplomacy due to a crisis, and that was 9/11 occurred. And when that occurred, we had a professor, Jane Simpkin. We had a graduate student, Myra Aronson. Actually, professor was Myra Aronson. Jane was the graduate student. And then Tita Popolo's mother, Sonia, was on that. And I had a group of students that evening from Saudi Arabia that said, would like to have a group of people from Emerson go over. And, of course, it was controversial, still is. But we decided the best way to try to come with some commonalities, and I think we've reaped rewards, as we can see in terms of global politics, is we started talking. And so we were the first group to go over after 9/11. And in terms of reactions to a crisis, I think there's always what we would call the pathway, the new normal. And I had been going to Rosarito. I'd gone for part of my doctoral program was at USC. And I'd gone down to Rosarito Beach, which was great. And the Rosarito Beach Hotel is famous. It's the largest hotel outside of Cabo. But they were experiencing a terrible situation when President Calderon, who had graduated from Harvard, declared war on the drug cartel. And no one was coming. So we had the president, which was really the mayor of the city, Hugo Torres, said to me, would you help us, given Emerson's communication background? So in 2008, my sister Janice, who was running her own program after running the internship at Emerson and then launching the BU program, was doing her own international group. She and I sat down and we started a program which was called Rediscover Rosarito, which became a part of the Emerson Communication Studies Global Pathways. And what we did was we went down and we worked very closely with the mayor, business leaders, to come up with campaigns, not to dupe people, but to give them the facts. And that is, we were factually showing at the time that the crime rate in Rosarito was actually lower than the crime rate in parts of San Diego. Or when people said to me, I don't think that it's a safe place to go, I remember showing them 2 crime statistics and saying, this is this one and this is Rosarito. And I said, which one is the one? And they said, this one. I said, oh, that's Boston. So that's another factor that we could talk about. But what we did was we worked with the community leaders. We had what we call the Rediscover Rosarito Film Festival. Mike McManus began it. Mark Brody's been working on it. But the other part we had was a developing group of people that wanted not just the film festival where they do PR, they do pitching, they do everything. But they make movies with the Emerson and Mexican students. But there are people who wanted other parts of civic engagement. And Rosie Torres started the first Boys and Girls Club in Mexico. And she, through donations, has a group. Sometimes it's as many as 100 kids. And, of course, they come from usually single parents and they're out there, they're playing. She's given a lot, and she said, "Could you come out and be a part of that?" So you were there, you were a part of it. And what I would say is when you would see these kids, and of course we had people that were musicians, given Emerson's artistic talents, people like you that are very good in soccer. And what was it like for you? I'm kind of turning the say, what was it like for you playing with these kids, some of whom were like 7 or 8 years old, and they were playing soccer, and we called it the Hugo Torres soccer tournament?
Yeah, so my experience was, we'd go down there and we'd be at the venue, and I'm covered in tattoos, and some of the kids, I'm gringo, covered in tattoos. A lot of the kids were kind of like a little scared, like, who is this guy? We've never seen him here before.
Yes.
And we don't speak the same language because my Spanish isn't very good. And, that would be the start of the day. And then we get the ball out, we'd start playing, we'd get these games going on. And throughout the process of playing the sport, we would just become, very close and friends throughout the game.
Magic of soft power.
Yes. And then by the end of it, we're inside playing volleyball or, dribbling some basketballs around. And they were then behaving like the kids they were again. And they were like very happy to have you around and be able to be engaged with you. And they were no longer like afraid of the tattooed gringo guy. They were like, yeah, we weren't speaking the same language, but they were very happy to be able to play sports with me. And we were able to connect through that, the commonality of the sport. And I think, that was an experience I had when I was maybe a senior at Lake Erie College at that point. And I think that's affected me very much to what I do today with Beat the Streets. So yeah, it was so much fun. It was so great just seeing how we were able to just build a connection around that. And it was always fun to go back and have that shared experience with them.
I think that's the magic of soft power. The soft power is just your connection. And it gets you where you have a commonality. Sometimes it's sports, sometimes it's fashion, sometimes it's food, maybe it could be tattoos, who knows. But something you share in common, even though ideologically, politically, religiously, and then you get into what, we do and what I love about the college where I am, and that is storytelling. Okay, when did you first learn about soccer? When did you first learn how to make a spot show? And that to me is how you then form the commonalities. And as I don't want to get too deep into this, as Kenneth Burke would say, life is about coming together and growing apart. And what I want to try to do is use these soft power tools to come together.
Yeah. And this summer, as you mentioned earlier, it's like watching all of our kids come together. By the end of the program, it was like they felt great because they had just accomplished something like very difficult in ways, doing 4 days a week, 5 weeks of training hard, doing these workshops, creating content. But there was definitely like, oh, I'm sad that it's over. I'm sad that it's over. I'm not going to be able to see my friends every morning again. Some of them are going off to college themselves. In a couple weeks, Boston starts school again, so they'll be at different high schools. And of course we're still running wrestling practices and they're getting to train together, but there was definitely that sense of like, man, this was something that was like really special for us all to come together and be part of. And I think that, as well as what we can talk about here, is being able to be around college faculty on a college campus. What do you think is the value of, one, like we've talked about them building that strong community, doing all this shared experience together, but having done that on a college campus when some of them are, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, maybe 10th, 11th, and haven't really considered college before?
I think it's going to be a transformative experience. And I say that because, first of all, I know how much dedication that you have. I know how much dedication Brett and others have with the Beat the Streets programs. And you could see it, you could feel it. I saw the tears in the tough guys' eyes that they didn't want to leave. I saw parents, you had people say this has been the best experience. It's turned him around or her around. And I, just as an example, tonight I'm going to be having dinner with Randy Boston, whose last name is Randy Boston. He was one of the Bird Street kids. That was 12 years ago. And so I've sort of become a surrogate parent, for Randy and DJ and Astrid and that group. And I think what you have done is you're never going to take the place of their real mothers or fathers, but you're a mentor and a coach that's going to be someone they'll always remember. So I think that's why these programs are transformational. And I think for all the professors that participated, in various departments, journalism, our department, and throughout the college, as well as alumni. You had one of the biggest influencers around there, correct?
Yeah, Gilad Haas, who is co-founder of Shadow Lion with Tom Brady and two-time Emmy Award winner, and he came in and spoke to the kids and spent time with them. And he's about my age, and he's just very well accomplished. Didn't have to come in and spend his time doing that, but was very passionate and motivated to do it. And just having alumni who want to come in and do these type of projects is awesome. And he, I think the kids walked away from that like really excited that they had the chance to meet him. He's worked on Man in the Arena, which was a great documentary. And just hearing his process, and they did like group activities while he was there. I think all of the faculty and people who came in left saying this was an incredible group of kids. They were so engaged the whole time. We had people from the city of Boston who came in and talked to them, and they would leave saying this was the best group that we got to work with all summer. Like they were just really, all the kids leaned in. It was like maybe it was because we got them in the weight room in the morning. I was very passionate about getting access to that weight
Right.
room,
Yes.
because I knew that would play into them being able to be engaged better for the workshops, and pushing them, challenging them that way in the morning, and then getting them doing group projects with these awesome group of people who were coming in. Ken Grout came in and we did mock press conferences, and it was really, we had very heartfelt stuff that the kids were saying, and then we did a silly version where they were kind of role playing stuff that happened and just working on that public speaking skills. We did that week 1, and it played throughout the rest of it, like getting them confident and getting them exposed to standing up and presenting and talking in front of a group, getting comfortable with the community. I think that was very valuable. So then all the other guest speakers that we had come in noticed that same thing. I want to say that another fun part was doing the podcasting as well. So they were recording podcasts and they got to pick their topics. That was great, great experience for them. So some of you might be listening to this, might soon be listening to some of our Beat the Streets wrestlers who went through the Emerson Sports Leadership Program, their own podcast. So, keep an eye out for the next big show taking over the internet.
Yeah, I think one thing I appreciated about your curriculum was that you did begin kind of at the essence of what the college is about, and that is public speaking. So you had Jane Pierce Saulnier, who's won awards in terms of how you craft courses in that area. The fact that you had Angela Connolly and Luann Reed, both, of course, wonderful people from the journalism department. Elizabeth Peterson, I know, and I'm probably going to be missing some people. But what I loved about it was the anxiousness of the faculty, whether it's academic or whether they were professionals coming to be a part of this. And I know many of them have said that students have kind of reached out and all of that type of thing. But I think for all of us at the college, but more importantly for those of us in Boston, these types of civic engagement programs need to be something that anyone listening should say, let's do this too. Because especially in today's era, we need to take pride. We need to know, again, that change begins in each of us. And the beauty of what you did this summer is when I looked at those eyes that last day they were there, of course, a little teary-eyed, I could see that each of them were going to be change agents. They're never going to forget this program thanks to you.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing that. You mentioned taking pride, and that was what Gilad, one of his key takeaways was take pride in your work. And I think that each of these kids, like some of them are working on newsletters right now to participate in like that being sent out to tell the story of the summer. And they're taking a lot of pride in that. They take pride in how hard they train in wrestling. Jay Williams came by and gave him a very motivational speech, which was awesome.
I
Dr.
saw that,
Jay,
yes.
Yeah, he was great. And just two other people I want to give. Melissa, we mentioned her, like some really awesome people that came in. But also he probably won't hear this, but Shane Sparks from the Big Ten Network.
Yes. I love Big Ten, as you know.
Yes, yeah, I think because the kids will be doing play call and commentary, and Mark Brody worked with them on that. And they did some mock college press conferences college dual meets. And this winter we're going to be doing all of their high school dual meets will be done commentary and play by play by the youth themselves, and hopefully some Emerson students as well. And Shane Sparks came and gave him his experience. He's one of the main faces of wrestling play by play. So that was awesome. And then Caden Henshaw, spent a week doing personal branding, and Caden Henshaw is kind of like that guy in the wrestling world. For those listeners who maybe don't follow wrestling, Caden Henshaw has grown a huge following just as a college athlete by creating content. Now he has his own shoe brand and a lot of other projects going on. And I think that there are people like that in the wrestling world because our stars are so accessible who want to give back. But that's not always the case in a lot of different places. And I think the Emerson community is just very excited about opportunities like that to give back. So just one more time, a special thanks to all the Emerson people who are involved to make this summer happen for our kids. They might not realize how much of an impact they had on them, but I'm sure we'll hear about it for years to come. So one of my final questions is, and you kind of touched on it, but what are some of the things that Emerson gains from doing stuff like this? Because it's not always, some schools might not think that they get much out of it. And, Beat the Streets our athletes and our youth got so much out of it.
From my perspective, having been there for 43 years, this is the essence of what Emerson College is. And I think, especially as you said, we're on the front porch of America. We're downtown. We are literally at the heartbeat of the city. And that's why I know that the president is very committed to ensuring that we continue to reach out. I think also it's a pathway for people, for students, not only to come to visit, maybe they're going to go to school there, but I think they're going to appreciate wherever they go to school. They're going to appreciate the importance of having the academic perspective, but more importantly, how does that apply into the real world? And what we're committed to is to train leaders in communication, to also be involved in critical thinking. And one thing I was very happy to see you do is to impart with people, you could use snazzy technology, you can do all types of apps, but at the end of the day, your brand, your ethos, I mean, we call it brand, Aristotle said ethos, is what you say and what you do. You're responsible for everything that you do. And I think the one thing that Emerson takes away from it is we've trained a group of people that are not committed to accept the way it is today, but to say, let's move to a better place. And the other thing I would say, if I tie back into Barcelona, which is a part of my DNA, is I think for everybody there, they are going to be the epitome of what the motto was for 1992, and that is Amigos por Siempre, or Friends for Life. So Shepherd, you have expanded friendship, and they'll never forget it.
Awesome. Yeah. I think just like when you travel, everybody always, no matter where you are in the world, everybody says, Dr. Payne, you just happen to run into people I'm sure you're going to run into a lot of these youth in the future. So, Friends for Life for you as well. I'm asking our producer how much time we have left. All right, we have a little bit of time left, and that means that I get to have you share one of my favorite Dr. Payne stories. So, this is one of the stories. When you hang out with a guy like Dr. Payne, who has done just some of the coolest projects all over the place, you get to hear just story after story after story because, as he said, Emerson is a place of storytellers. And this is one that I think doesn't get enough, just like the Wheel of Fortune. It's not out there enough. And I would like for you to share your experience with Dr. Iwasaki.
Dr. Iwasaki, yeah.
Who is, the library is named after him at Emerson right now. And you were able to build a good relationship with him.
It's interesting. Yes, Shu Iwasaki, who is just a remarkable person who has been committed throughout his life to what we call Green Cross, and that is sustainability and making sure that we leave the world in a better place than we inherited, which I think our generation needs to think about that. But he worked very closely, even before the breakup of the Soviet Union, with Mikhail Gorbachev. And, we have stereotypes of Russia and the Soviet Union. Mikhail Gorbachev was someone that Shu Iwasaki had found to be, first of all, very committed, loved to be a good cook, but also shared Shu's views about let's make sure that we give our grandchildren, our kids, a better future. So Dr. Iwasaki, I met at a graduation, and it was interesting because he spoke no English. I spoke no Japanese. I have a Japanese aunt that my uncle in the Navy married from Tokyo, and she taught me how to do chopsticks. So when we ate, I at least knew how to do chopsticks. But we hit it off due to the fact that we could just, I guess, feel the warmth of each other and the body language. And so he asked me to come. And again, we brought a group of students. We brought a group of students on the second trip. We brought a group of students for the Kyoto Winter, or not Kyoto, for the Nagano Winter Olympics in '98. But I think the trip you're referring to, right after the graduation, Dr. Iwasaki said, could you come and visit in Kyoto? And so I was there during the Kyoto Treaty Accords, and he was there he's a very important spiritual leader, and he was there. And he then said to me, I went to various meetings and, had dignitaries who I had not seen or met before. And he said, tonight we're going to have a very special kind of dinner. But everything with Dr. Iwasaki is special. So I never knew exactly what it was until I walked in, and it was a very small dinner. And of course, Dr. Iwasaki was there. He said to me, I know that you're somewhat intrigued by global politics. So he said, we have another guest. That was Mikhail Gorbachev. Okay. And then the last guest that we had was the Dalai Lama. So it was a very, very interesting dinner with the three. And I remember distinctly the Dalai Lama was, spiritually very, very positive. But most of the conversation, it was between myself and Mikhail Gorbachev, who kept referring to me as the Amerikansky, and he would sort of do jabs, rhetorical jabs, but they were very positive. He would just sort of say, "What are you going to do to change things here?" But again, here was an example of someone who had bridged the gap, Shu Iwasaki, through just the power of something that they had in mind. And one thing I would say to your students, as well as everyone out there, is if you have an opportunity, take it. And one of the parts of my odyssey that I've enjoyed is sometimes there's setbacks and you think, gee, that's not what I thought was going to happen. But then later I found if you keep persevering, it's better. So I've been able to sort of travel the world, and I've enjoyed people. I love Boston. I love being on the front porch of America. But if you have the opportunity to go someplace, please do. Shepard was apprehensive when he first went to Rosarito after one night. We won't get into that, but we had a very good conversation, and now he's a world traveler. Sometime, if you're in the audience out there, you need to ask him what happened when we went to, I think it was Brazil, right?
Oh,
or
Chile.
Shepard was there the first night, and then I didn't see him for 3 more days. I think he was more or less taken over by the young ladies and the people of Chile.
Well, as you model for me all the time is, building relationships and creating friendships that last forever. And to the Rosarito story, so that people, because you love to share this, there happened to be a big hole on one of the roads in Rosarito, and
this was your first trip out of Ohio,
This is my
right?
first, not out of Ohio, but first trip out of the United States for sure.
Yes.
Yeah. And I actually had taken a good friend of mine's, Patrick Ewing shoes. They were really nice shoes that I stole from him for the week to take and wear on the trip down there.
I didn't know that context. Not even your boots, okay?
And there was a big hole, and I just stepped all the way knee deep into this hole on the road that it didn't smell very well.
And Shepard came to my room and said, this isn't for me. I think I'm going to go home tomorrow. And I said, why? And he kind of looked at the boot. I didn't realize he had to explain to it. But we had a good conversation. And I said, I think that there's a pathway not only here, but for you. And Shepard has been an incredible change agent. He has been someone, as I said, he has masters at Emerson, masters at Blanquerna, and continues to enrich all of us, not with his academic prowess, which he does, but also with his commitment to making sure the world is a better place.
Well, I appreciate hearing that. And then I appreciate now that this is out there for the whole world to know about my sad first day at Rosarito, even though I know you share it with all of a lot of your students.
It's
when I come
a little
into
bit
your
like
courses.
Wheel of Fortune, okay? What can I say?
A little payback there for sure. Well, thank you, Dr. Payne, for being on the podcast today. It's always a pleasure. I'm sure we'll have you on again at some point. And, the one thing I would like to say is, like, now that you know so much about wrestling, it would have been interesting for you to have that Gorbachev conversation, because he probably was a big wrestling advocate. So, next time if you ever run into Putin, you might be able to talk to him about wrestling.
Well, if I do run into Putin, I'm not going to be drinking or eating anything, okay?
No gastro diplomacy.
No
on that
gastro
trip.
diplomacy. And maybe the next time I see you, I will venture out and maybe get at least one small tattoo that says ILL.
ILL, yes, the Illini. All right, thank you for joining, Dr.
Thank
Payne.
you. Take care.
Yes.
All the best.